I'm sure by now most of us have seen the Twitter riots going on over the new video by Corridor, but I decided I would be courteous and give the video a fair chance. It took me approximately 38 seconds to stop the video to go off on a rant, and now you guys get to hear the far more eloquent version of the half an hour of hell I just experienced. I would like to start off with my credentials for this, so you get an understanding of why this video filled me with so much hatred. First up, I graduated with a degree in video game art, which is surprisingly relevant to their workflow. I also did modules on animation and VFX, so I have a vague knowledge on both. In my master's degree, as well as after, I helped start a children's animation studio, which failed, but still lasted longer than it took Corridor to make their AI animation. My final credential is I have been watching anime for over a decade, and could immediately see the flaws in what they think anime is. Before touching the video itself, I think we should look at the clickbait they used in their title and thumbnail. Did we just change animation forever? Now supposedly this was originally anime, not animation, but I only have screenshots to go off of. For the sake of honesty, I've never really been a fan of their content, and found it quite juvenile and overproduced for an okayish joke. But this video in particular just reeked of an almost violent hatred of animation, artists, and art in general. So this brings us back to those 30 seconds in, notably this line.
The most creatively liberated medium is also the least democratized.
Let me just stop you there. Is it just me, or does this sound like someone too lazy to learn to animate? Now this is where some of my credentials come in. I am aware of how goddamn hard it is to make an animation. We had a team with less time to devote and almost no money behind us, and that just meant we had to think creatively. Deciding on what animation medium a project will be in is an important step in pre-production. Speaking of pre-production, they give us a glimpse of their pipeline, and it's interesting.
So we wrote this short film. The next step is to treat it like a cartoon, which means recording the dialogue first.
I understand it's a tight video, but to gloss over writing the entire script for a 7-minute short film is bold to say the least. But at least they do seem to have actually written it themselves. I genuinely expected that to be AI as well. It took me a good few hours to write this simple script, and this video is some minutes long. We also see in another shot that their storyboarding was seemingly done in Excel as a shot list, with some descriptions and comments of the shot. This is a VFX pipeline, not an animation pipeline. And throughout this whole video, we see almost arbitrary choices on what parts of animation they do and don't keep. If I were to be cynical, I would say it was due to a lack of knowledge or research. Maybe we just don't see them, but with their outward disdain towards animation,
We don't run an animation studio, and it's very hard to do so.
I don't think that's the case. I think they took the easy and familiar route, a VFX shot list. I could be generous and hope they're hiding some thumbnails and storyboards under the floorboards, but a deliberate omission like that just makes us scummier. Let's follow the pipeline along and move on to production. Which also reminds me, this video jumps about a little with its pipeline, but it's roughly chronological, so most of this video will also be chronological. It starts with a breakdown of how they train the AI, which is interesting but felt underexplained yet overexplained to me. I did learn more about the diffusion process AI art uses, as well as how that system seems to create unreplicatable and low-functioning results. Many people have pointed out that they do not touch the subjects of ethics in AI, and I will point out that's because most of this video focuses on how Hollywood is gatekeeping all of us from animation. This is typically done through the overuse of the word democratizing, an insanely hypocritical statement as I will explain later. So for production, they used a green screen set to film the live-action plates that will be the basis for the film. Some of the more interesting points of this include covering costumes with tape to make them simpler.
We're covering all that up with a color that's similar to the rest of the costume.
Treating the live action as puppetry, which was a weird choice of words. Personally, I would have used over-dramatized. But I don't have a YouTube with millions of subs, so what do I know?
Because, once again, we're trying to treat it like a cartoon.
Well, I know enough to know this makes no goddamn sense. You aren't treating it like a cartoon because, first of all, I thought this was an anime, and also you seemingly have no understanding of the animation pipeline of any country. They speak about creating an art style for the short, and even reference the idea of a style guide as used by Hanna-Barbera for Scooby-Doo. But their idea of a style guide is to train the AI on screenshots of one anime from 2000 for consistency. This doesn't even work well, as we learn later on that the anime they chose has 0 characters with beards. So they had to use the AI to generate cartoony images of Nico, and then add those back to the training set. It just feels like a project held together with masking tape, which would seem cool and endearing if it was an actual animation studio, and not tech bros who think animation is cool and is subversive, I don't want to learn a single animation technique kind of way. Next we hear Nico talk about how lighting in anime is flat and doesn't use multiple lighting sources as it would be difficult to draw. This would make more sense if he didn't keep referencing cartoons which have little to no lighting at all. Is it a cartoon or an anime? Please get your references straight. For this part, we see clips of Ponyo and Attack on Titan, both shows that do in fact use complex lighting for some effect, just not all the way through. This is a legitimate technique in animation called allocating resources where they're most needed. He then goes on to fully embody every tech bro scam artist with this line.
At the end of the day, anime, it's just really all about tying your visual language to the story and really getting into there, stylizing it, thinking about things metaphorically, all that kind of stuff. Once again, it's your ideas that matter, right? It's your direction, your story.
We get it. You're an ideas guy and Hollywood is gatekeeping you from creating your magnum opus. What if rock, paper, scissors was anime? You know, despite the fact you've created many live action anime style shorts with your VFX skills, all of which you reference in the video. Why all of a sudden are you entitled to animation? You have the skills to make these projects, and probably the money to hire an animator or two if you really wanted it to be 2D. It is during this segment we get one of the more infuriating lines when they break to do a merch drop, and that's all because of this funny little line.
It's designed by a human.
Designed by a human! All of a sudden that has some kind of weight to it. Why aren't you putting your huge labor of love on a t-shirt? Maybe because it's currently a legal nightmare to produce an AI-generated design for sale. But we wouldn't want to highlight that sort of thing and make this project look unethical now, would we? It's a personal issue of mine that credit is sparse in this video. They do directly credit the t-shirt artist in the description, but other things are almost deliberately vague, as you'll see. Next we hear that there are 120 effects shots in their 7-minute short film. This is not elaborated on. Considering all of the plates were on green screen, that could just be chroma keying out every shot. But we do see more VFX later, such as speed lines and effects. 2D effects that seem to have been animated? Now call me a crazy conspiracy theorist here, but I don't think these guys know they're animating. Unless they managed to find some assets that almost perfectly follow the action in their shot, someone had to make that effect through 2D animation. They do not explain what was used to make these. We then see what the AI can produce having been trained on stills from the green screen and see this, which is lauded as being positive despite all of the usual AI jank on the hands and face. As a small aside, pick images that don't make your project look worse. That's just a little video making tip from me, an amateur. Part of their pipeline baffles me. They take each still frame, run it through Stable Diffusion to animify it, deflicker it in DaVinci Fusion, chroma key out the character, and then they reduce it to 12 frames per second to be more in line with animation frame rates, thus making half of the running through AI redundant and wasting possibly hours or days of this project. Even if they use software to do this, that is precious time and computing power down the drain. So now we have cut out our many little men. We move on to the backgrounds, which is where my degree finally comes into use. They use Unreal 5 for the background. Specifically,
I think it was called the Gothic Interior Mega Pack.
I checked, and it was indeed called that, but crazy, you don't seem to show the studio who made it, or the fact it cost £250. That's not very democratized of you to gatekeep an asset. They do make edits to the lighting in this scene, and some other unnamed changes, which is impressive since they don't actually seem to know how to use Unreal. Capture the backgrounds, he exports a high-resolution screenshot, and then moves the camera manually to create a panning shot. But to be fair, this would otherwise require animating the camera, and we know they don't touch that gross high skill stuff of keyframing 2 points. No. Much easier to do the bare minimum and refuse to learn new skills. That's what makes a great artist. These images are then run through the AI to create a far worse version of the 3D. This is a funny little fact about anime, but 3D backgrounds exist. In fact, they exist on a scale from good to bad. As with any tool, it's about learning when to use it appropriately, and if it looks worse than an alternative, maybe you're using it incorrectly. I am proved further right about this when the person compositing has to import the backgrounds into Photoshop to create a longer image he can animate. I mean, magically move from side to side. This results in one of the key features of Gothic architecture, the 45-degree angle window and wall, some 300 years before MC Escher even had his ideas. This guy also uses the phrase, "there are no 3D moves," which I cannot break down because I have no idea what he means. If he means camera movement, he is wrong. They also use the AI to make some candelabras 2D, but then use them as a foreground that is so blurred, you could have just used the 3D and no one would know. It's not even a case of rendering them in Unreal being harder, they already had the PNGs to put in the AI. Knowing where to put your time is a key skill in creating an animation, And it really is okay to cut corners that no one will see, such as blurry candlesticks, and focus your time on what people will see, your main character's horrifyingly ever-changing face. The final aspect of this video is more about the democratization, but instead of exposing you to Nico's description of it, let me point out in every way in which he is a hypocrite. Their full version of the tutorial on their pipeline is paywall behind a subscription. They use a £250 asset pack. They use Photoshop. They have thousands of dollars in lighting and cameras. They have at least 5 PCs that cost more than my year's rent each. And numerous other costs that conveniently they didn't link to. And then there's the cost of your time. Making animation is fun, but I still have bills due, and I don't have millions of subscribers to help pay for all this. I did the maths back when we were running our studio of 9, and on a string shoe budget, it would have cost nearly 150k to run our professional studio full time. Thank fuck it all fell apart before we had to make that happen. But sure, anyone can make a cartoon with just their phone and free software anyone has access to. Nico outright sums it up for me.
But the only way I can create really cool things is with the help of other people helping make the technology to create those really cool things.
But those people aren't animators for some reason. Because why would you hire some animators when you could spend 2 months using software that churns out something that looks kinda cool on a first glance, I guess? So in the spirit of actually democratizing animation, it's already free. In fact, it's so free and cheap and accessible, I guarantee most people watching this video have already animated something before. A flipbook. All you need is paper and something to draw with to animate. If you want to get fancy and do 3D animation, Blender is right there, as free and open source as Stable Diffusion, but with hundreds of tutorials and the ability to learn a new skill and create a product that is fully yours. Unreal Engine is free to use, and there are free assets on the marketplace that you can play around with various levels of commercial rights. For 2D art, there's Critter and GIMP, both free and open source, but they don't recommend these products, because they're selling you the solution to a problem they have made up. You can animate right now with no paywall, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise.